Okay, welcome back. We're going to finish off where we left off, and that's converting fractions to decimals to percents and percents to decimals to fractions. And yes, I do work in that order. I work from a fraction to a decimal to a percent, and notice the order is important. Notice my arrows. It helps me remember which way to move my decimal. And then when I'm going from a percent to a decimal to a fraction, it helps me remember that as well. We're working through this chart, and I'm trying to keep an eye on the time so that the podcasts do not get extremely long. And we've worked our way up to 37.5%. And I know that's tiny, but it is there and you can see it. It says 37.5%, and we want to change that first to a decimal. So we write it down and we take 37.5, move that decimal back to the left 2 spaces, one for the 7, one for the 3. The new decimal place will be in front of the 3, and that's 0.375. Then as we come over here, that will then give us 0.375 to change into a fraction. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Remember your place values. As you do these, your place values tell you what number to put in the bottom of your fraction, your denominator. That's the thousandths place, so we put it over 1,000. Then put the top number, or the number, excuse me, in the top, 375. Because if you read this, this would be 375 thousandths, 375 thousandths. Now, if I want to reduce this fraction, I'm going to divide both the top and the bottom by whatever goes into both. And I'm going to start with an easy number. I generally start by saying, are they divisible by 10? Are they divisible by 5? In this case, because they're divisible by 5, I'm going to go on and jump up and say 75 looks like it's divisible by 25. So 375 divided by 25. And that gives me 15. And then I'm going to do 1,000 divided by 25, which gives me 40. And then 5 goes into both of those. 5 goes into 15 3 times. 5 goes into 40 8 times. I'm noticing just a little bit of glare, so I'm going to do just a couple of things. Don't know if that cut down on the glare or not, but we tried. Okay, the next thing is the 0.4. Notice the green is from the previous problem. That's just scratch work. So we have 0.4. There is a decimal place there. That is 0.4. So that's 4/10. Now, I can go back here and do 4/10 first. That's just going to be 4 over 10, and then that reduces down. 2 goes into both of them. 2 goes into 4. 2 goes into 4 2 times. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5, so that's 2/5. But then again, we move in this direction, so we're going to take the 4, and we need to move 2 places. Notice we only have 1 place to move. To move that second place, we need to add a 0 so that we can actually move the 2 places. 1, 2. So we have both of those places to move. So that becomes, with the new decimal place after the 0, we can say 40%, or we don't really even need the decimal place since it's at the end of the number. So we can say that that's 40%. Okay, here we have 0.5. So we're going to take 0.5 and we're going to change that to 5. It's the tenths place, so it goes over 10. Remember, 1 decimal place gives us 1 0. Up here, 3 decimal places gave us 3 zeros. And then 5/10. 5 goes into 5 1 time. 5 goes into 10 2 times. And then to change the 5/10 is the same way. We need 2 decimal places to be able to move. Since we're moving from a decimal to a percent, then we move it 2 places to the right, and so we need a second decimal place, and to get that 2 decimal places, it puts it right there at the end, so that becomes 50%. The next one is 60%. So we take the 60, we're going to move it, since we're moving from a percent to a decimal, we're going to go back 2 places to the left, and that will give us 0.60. We don't actually have this need the 0 at the end after a decimal, so you could also write it as 0.6. And over here, that's going to be 60, so that'd be don't need the decimal, so you're going to have 60 over tenths, hundredths, so that's going to be over 100. 2 places after the decimal gives us 2 zeros, 100, and then divide both by 10. 60 divided by 10 is 6, 100 divided by 10 is 10, then divide each by 5. Now, because I'm really emphasizing the way to move the decimal is to follow this pattern, one thing that you could do is, if you're on your test, is to write this pattern down: fraction, decimal, percent, and then that would help you remember which direction to move your decimal when you get your test. Now, that's not to say to bring in a cheat note. That's to say, after your test is there, to make yourself a note that makes it easier to follow. Again, let's look at the next one. And I'm going to cheat myself and fold that down so it's a little easier to see the ones at the bottom. Okay, we've got 0.625. So we're going to move the decimal back 0.625 because we're going from a percent to a decimal. We're going back to well, I've already wrote the answer down. I got in a hurry. You'll have to excuse me because we're going 0.625. We're going back 2 places, and it goes back and becomes a 0.625. You know, when you've done percents as long as I have, sometimes you just automatically think of them this way and you get ahead of yourself. So I moved it back 2 places and wrote the answer without even thinking about it. Now let's change that decimal into a fraction, and again in this case that will be over 1,000, and we get our 625 over the tenths, hundredths, thousandths, since that's in the thousandths place. And this time I'm going to shortcut it to again show you on this video how to use the calculator to reduce your fraction. You're going to type in 625 divided by 1,000, and yes, that's going to give you the decimal answer again, so you could have just typed in the decimal, and then you're going to press the math key, and then you're going to press and choose either 1 for the fraction that's already highlighted, or enter to select it because it's highlighted, and then that's going to convert the answer into a fraction, which would give us 5/8. And that just automatically reduces it. And that was just to kind of break up things to show you how to use the calculators. I'm going to star the next problem because it's another one that I really think that you need to have memorized. Because it is really complicated to change this into a fraction. It was not too bad to change the fraction into a percent earlier in its counterpart, but it's really complicated to go backwards. But I'm going to show you how. To change it to a decimal is not too bad. We just take the 66.66 and we see that the 6's are repeating. We come back, move our decimal back 2 places, and it's 0.6666, and the decimals repeat. Doesn't matter how many 6's you put. Now I'm going to use this form to change it into a percent. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a sheet of scratch paper a little bit bigger so that you can see this, so I'm not trying to write and scrunch up a lot of work. I'm going to multiply and change 66 2/3 into a fraction. Now remember, it'd still be a percent, but I'm just going to change it into a fraction. And it's going to be 3 times 66, and to keep from making a mistake, and to show you that, yeah, I use my calculator too, I get 198, and then that's 198. If I take 66 and divide them into thirds, I get 198 pieces, plus 2 more, gives me 200 thirds percent. And remember that the other way to change a percent into a fraction is to write the percent over 100, and we haven't done that in any of these problems. You can do that on any of these problems, is to take your percent and write them over 100. And I'll do that probably on one more just to show you that it works. I haven't been doing that simply because I'm trying to teach you a nice way to do it, one way, so that you don't get confused and that you can always do it. Even if it doesn't ask you for the decimal, if you go through the decimal to get to the fraction, you're still not doing an extreme amount of extra work, and it works out real nice. But in this case, it's really much easier to change the percent. This is probably the one exception, is when we have these repeating decimals. As in, this becomes 0.66 repeating. So now we have 200 thirds divided by 100. So I'm going to write that as a division problem. 200 thirds divided by 100. And remember, division is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. And then I'm just going to multiply it out by multiplying the top and multiplying the bottom. And then I'm going to reduce that fraction by dividing the top by 100 and the bottom by 100, and there's my 2/3. That's a lot of work to do. So this is why I started this problem as well. And I used to tell students that both of these problems were going to be on my test and they had better have them memorized. I just feel like these are both ones that are used. You often have things that are on sale for 1/3 off or 33% off, and so knowing how that's a fraction is 1/3 and is 33 1/3, or that 66% off is the same as 2/3, those are very, very common ones, and knowing those answers can really make life easier for you. And at this point, we've run out of time and my phone's ringing, so I'm going to stop the recording. Check out the last part.